Hey guys, welcome to Get Busy Watching. I'm your host, Honest Dan. Let's talk movies. It's that time of year where horror fanatics thrust their love of Halloween onto everyone. And in my case, I avoid all of them by staying indoors and watching movies. Whee! Horror movies and I have had a complicated relationship. When I was a wee lad, I was nightmare prone. Never liked being scared, so, with some notable exceptions, I avoided horror films. As I got older, I developed a pretentious attitude that I somewhat still have, when I declared all horror films follow the same mathematical formula. Stupid people making stupid decisions, getting themselves or other stupid people killed. Nothing to invest in, no artistic value, or it's just torture porn, which definitely not my style. It's only been in the last 4 or 5 years where I've actually been hardcore watching everything that I've developed an open mind. I'm not nearly as nightmare prone as I used to be since I was a kid or a teenager, and some horror films have actually surprised me over the years. There is effort put into them on occasion, and aren't just cynical, desperate attempts to draw in the teenage crowd. Not that those movies don't exist, but I've grown to keep my eyes out for quality scary flicks, and can even get hyped for some, which brings us here to the now. I'm kicking off Halloween month with a list of my top 6 favorite horror movies. Why 6? I don't know, these are the ones that stand out for me when I started thinking about them. But a couple of things to keep in mind. 1, this isn't going to be in any hard and fast order, so don't expect number 6 to be my least favorite of my favorite films or my number 1 to be my favorite. I love all of these movies for different reasons. Number 2, I am aware that some of these movies are not the best horror films on the market. With that said, they still stand out for me, so no attacking my taste. With that said, let's get this party started. Number 6, House of the Dead. The story follows a group of college kids on their way to a rave with their peers on a deserted island, only to discover that they've all disappeared and the island is inhabited by zombies. With the help of a sea captain and a police officer, they fight to survive. Oh boy, we are starting this shindig off with a doozy, and my personal favorite bad movie. That's right. You can have your trolls too. You can keep your The Room. I have arguably the worst video game adaptation ever made. This movie gets everything wrong. The unbelievably bad directing from notorious filmmaker Uwe Boll, the debatably worse writing, the cheap environment, the bafflingly clunky plot, the insertion of actual video game footage for zero reason, or the fact that this doesn't even take place in a house, more like a shack. This is almost a textbook example of how not to make a movie. And yet, this undeniable piece of shit has endeared me for countless years. Every reason that could possibly be listed as to why this movie sucks is every reason why I love it. Every friend that I have ever made, I have made sit down to watch this, and each and every one of them has loved it as much as I do. I can't wait to watch this again, and I hope if you're in the mood to watch a shitty zombie movie, you'll give this one a chance. Because once you do, there is no escape from the House of the Dead. Number 5, Deep Blue Sea. You think Jaws the Revenge is bad? You should see Avalanche Sharks. It was made acting like it was an actual movie. They weren't even real sharks. They were like ghost alien sharks or some fuck shit like that. But shark movies weren't always like this. There's one Shark B movie that is fondly remembered. Now, I don't know exactly what chords it struck to to be so popular amongst its loyal fan base 20 years later. Maybe it was the shameless violence of seeing people get ripped in half. Or maybe it was the surprisingly good performances by the actors. Or maybe it was making me an instant fan of Saffron Burrows for I swear to God not perverted 12-year-old reasons. Or maybe it was that fuck awesome score. Fuck yeah, motherfucker. But what I do know is that you made it out, impacted. Now maybe the CGI is dated now, and maybe the story takes itself too seriously. I mean, come on, curing Alzheimer's by making sharks smarter? Even the little kid in me called bullshit on that. Critics probably said it wasn't great. And maybe it isn't. Critics are snobs. But average Joes like me have defended the film and have been clamoring for a sequel that we'd all eventually regret. Now you've seen how bad things can get and how frequently and long they've been that way. So I've made a personal promise to myself regarding shark movies. I am not going to keep an open mind about them anymore. Nothing is going to leave an everlasting impression like Deep Blue Sea. Guys, I have no idea how I'm going to cut myself off, so I'm just going to... If you haven't checked this movie out, you need to. This was my favorite movie for the longest time as a kid, and is still one of my favorite shark movies of all time. Don't wait your entire life to see this movie, because one day it'll be tomorrow. Number 4. The Mist. The Mist is an adaptation of the Stephen King book of the same name. It follows a man and his son going to the store, but during their stay, a thick mist engulfs the town and anyone that goes outside is killed by unseen monsters. But as the survivors in the store get cooped up the longer they're there, the more desperate they get to maintain their survival, even if it means sacrificing their own. The Mist terrified me as a teenager. Less about the freaky trans-dimensional monsters that attacked everyone, even though their designs were actually really good, but rather for the terrifying religious aspects. This movie was my intro to Marcia Gay Harden, whom I thought stole the show, as well as Toby Jones. But I swear, for years, when I drove through fog or mist, I was always paranoid that a monster would come out and attack me. I have a fragile sense of reality, what can I tell you? I love the slow descent into madness and desperation, and unlike the vast majority that saw this, I love the ending. I thought it was bold and even unique. If you ever get a chance to watch this, watch the black and white version. Director Frank Darabont wanted it that way, but the studio said no to him. Yeah, say no to the guy who made The Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile. Anywho, still love this movie, and I recommend anyone to check it out. And remember, don't go into the mist. Number 3. The Cabin in the Woods. The story follows a group of 5 college friends who are taking a trip to a family-owned cabin that's isolated in the woods. Unbeknownst to them, they are being watched by a shadowy organization that unleashes horrors to kill the teens. Satires of horror films may not exactly be new, but you will never convince me that there's one as clever or as smart as this. I love this movie, and for a number of reasons. The most basic is that it's hilarious and pokes fun at nearly every horror trope that has driven me absolutely bonkers throughout my life, putting forth an explanation for them, but more importantly, reshapes how I look at these tropes and almost makes them enjoyable. But if that wasn't great enough, even haters of this movie have a role to play. I don't know about the rest of the lovers of this film, but I used to be of the mind that I had to explain what the movie was driving at to those who didn't. But the more I tried to argue, the more I realized that the haters are just as important to the experience. In a way, This movie needs to have its divisive groups. Otherwise, it would just be another popular satirical film. And where's the fun in that? And I haven't even dived into all of the references this movie makes. From the obvious movies to the not so obvious video games, it's as much of a mockery as it is a love letter to the genre. Even if you're not a fan of horror films, it's still one to check out. If you are a horror fan and you haven't seen this, drop what you're doing, grab some tequila because it's your lady, and hop on the bandwagon. Trust me, there's plenty of room whether you like the movie or not. Number 2. Now children, are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. The Others is set in post-World War II. A mother looking after her ailing children alone hires a trio of servants to help tend to their large house, which must be kept dark at all times, as the children are severely allergic to the light. But it isn't long before the daughter starts telling stories about ghosts living among them. Despite dismissing the claims, the mom slowly starts to realize that there might be truth to her words. As far as I'm concerned, The Others is a masterclass of horror films. A satire like Cabin leaving an impact makes sense because it's like the filmmakers are just as sick of cliches as we are. But a non-satire film actually doing something different that hasn't been successfully replicated since is truly unique. Sure, other horror films have been good and even great, but I can't think of a horror story that leaves such an impact quite like this. Deeply religious, cliches given a great makeover, spectacular acting from Nicole Kidman, solid scares, gripping drama. It's about the closest thing to a perfect horror film that I could ask for. If you haven't seen this movie, you are doing yourself a grave disservice. Even if you don't like horror films, even if you're not a fan of that genre, trust me, this one will leave its mark on you, and in the best possible way. If you ever have to ask where the good horror films are, don't be mad. This is a good horror film. And number 1. Sharing the top spot is The Conjuring and The Conjuring 2. The films loosely follow the exploits of real-life demonologists Ed and Lorraine Warren. The first film follows the Warrens helping a family of 7 who have experienced a malevolent spirit intent on possessing and killing the family. The sequel takes the Warrens to England, where they must help a young girl who has been possessed by the angry spirit of an old man that used to live in their house. You could make a pretty strong argument that these are actually my favorite horror movies of all time. Yes, the real-life events of Ed and Lorraine Warren are highly exaggerated, making themselves out to be heroes that they never actually were. But I mean, really? Based on true events? Did you take it that literal? In any case, there's one very specific reason why both of these films are so coveted by me. Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga as the Warrens. Their chemistry, coupled with great writing and directing by James Wan, ultimately culminates into the only horror films that have made me cry. Not because they were that scary, but because I was that invested in their characters. The movies knew how to create human connections, reasons to feel for these characters because they felt real. The stakes felt real. But more than that, the scares were never cheap, and this is especially true in the sequel. The true scares involve some of the more clever and creative scenes that I've ever seen in a horror film. Sure, not everything added up, technically making for a more flawed movie. But the emotions were cranked up, something I truly wasn't expecting. It's such a shame that all of their spin-offs fall short, with the exception of Annabelle Creation and possibly Annabelle Comes Home. But they just don't keep you engaged like the Conjuring proper films. I'm ecstatic for Conjuring 3 next year, but because the Conjuring universe only has 2 legit great films under its belt, you can color me optimistically cautious. No matter what happens, I will always have these first 2 films. No matter how bad the related movies get, They will never be able to take away my love for these. For I can't help falling in love with these two movies.
And help falling in love with you.
Thanks so much for watching, you guys. I really appreciate it. Throughout the month of October, I'm going to be watching a bunch of horror movies. Some I've already seen, but I'm definitely going to try and catch some that I haven't. So, if you have any suggestions, leave them in the comments. I'd love to hear them. They can be new movies. They can be old, popular, obscure, legit good, so bad that they're good. They can be mixed with comedies or action. You can give me one suggestion, 5, 10. I'm all ears, honestly. But other than that, have a great day, everyone. Hope to see you soon.